our session. All right, well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are joining us. And welcome. Thank you for your patience. We gave a couple more minutes for people to log in and join us. So today's workshop is focused on foundations of assurance of learning. What does the AOL process look like? What are the assessment cycles? And what is the point to all of it, which is essentially to use the assessment results for your academic and administrative decision-making processes. My name is Alima Jamian-Soren, and thank you to all of you who have participated in our previous webinars. We welcome you wholeheartedly. And just to kind of refresh, I'm the Director of Asia Pacific Operations of Peregrine Global Services. And I have been working as a global higher education consultant for over a decade, let's put it there. And I have taught, and I'm currently teaching management and leadership courses to postgraduate students. And with me today is my colleague, my esteemed colleague, Mr. Dattatri Raman, who heads the SEA Trust. And we're happy to partner and bring to you this fall series of webinars and workshops. Today is our second workshop, and it's designed to help the management schools with resources, right, and services to enhance quality assurance and quality of your business education. So my co-facilitator, my esteemed colleague, Dattatri, if you could say a couple words.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alima. I'm Dattatri Raman. I'm basically a business journalist turned into an academic. Yeah, I've been working in the academic field for the last almost 20 years, and I chair what is called Standard for Educational Advancement. It's basically a CR Trust is an accreditation support services and advocacy organization. And our own association with Peregrine is more than a decade at this point of time. And we are very focused on getting international benchmark quality to India, to ensure that student learning outcome is absolutely on par with what is available in the rest of the world. So today's workshop is relating to this very aspect of building quality and ensuring student learning outcome. This is the most amazing kind of core competence that is expected from any business school around the world, and definitely in India. In fact, the new education policy is insisting that the entire education process should be based on outcomes. So outcomes, in this case, our caveat is that the outcome by itself is not the only thing, but it should be quality outcome, and it should be benchmarked to the best in the world. So that's the basic thing. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of content inputs today. Basically, Alima is the one who's running the show at this point of time. Thank you, Alima, for this. And I'm sure this is going to be a very, very good, very useful webinar today. Thank you. Over to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Dattatri. So we plan to hold it as a participatory workshop, and there are multiple ways for you to take part. Please respond to the poll questions when they're presented. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand in the Zoom environment or type your question in the comment pane. We'll also plan to leave some time at the end for a Q&A. And then again, feel free to contact either Dattatri directly or myself with your further questions if you need some additional assistance or clarification or information. And if we don't get to your questions today, we surely will be happy to get back to you once you reach out to us. And there is also a gift for you to join this workshop, and that will be coming up very shortly. So let's dive straight into it, right? So when we look at the title of this workshop, it really is about looking at what we are doing at our institutions to improve quality, right? And quality through the notion of learning outcomes. So when we talk about assurance of learning, we are referring to how to demonstrate through assessment processes that students achieve learning expectations for the programs in which they participate. So development, measurement, and analysis of learning outcomes is integral into providing quality business programs at all of our institutions. So then, why are learning outcomes so important in higher education, right? We have made a promise to our students that when they complete our business programs or management programs, they will have acquired certain knowledge, certain competencies and skills, which they can apply to their work environments. Then how do we know we are delivering on those promises and learning expectations to our students? And how do we ensure that we continue delivering on those promises to our students? So the answer is by setting effective and measurable learning objectives, and of course, measuring them, right? In addition, we all know, and I'm sure you're working with a number of them, the quality assurance and accreditation agencies, they all require some form of, compliance with their quality assurance of learning standards. So measuring student learning, right? Measuring student learning objectives is not the end goal. Most importantly, we do it to ensure that we are constantly surveying, collecting data, and analyzing the student learning results to ensure that we are continually improving our academic programs. So to continue improving your learning environment and staying engaged with that learning process is important and something that institutions put into place to maintain that accountability. So there's, of course, great nexus between quality and accreditation. In addition to learning outcomes, goals, or objectives, they are required by all major international, be it programmatic or institutional accreditors. And Peregrine Global works with all of those organizations. And almost all of these accreditors, of course, as displayed here, require you to have identified and defined your learning objectives within the established framework of quality assurance processes. And these processes involve direct measurement, or sometimes both, indirect measures of learning resulting in programmatic evaluation. So for example, if your accreditor is AACSB, then in the new 2020 standard, Standard 5, touches upon assurance of learning, right? There it states that the schools must use well-documented assurance of learning processes. And they that include direct and indirect measures for ensuring the quality of all degree programs that are deemed in scope for accreditation purposes. But again, most importantly, the results of the AOL work should lead to improvements in curriculum, improvements in administrative processes. If you're working with ACBSB, another organization that Peregrine works very closely, as you are well aware, there's a whole, again, Standard 4 that is devoted to student learning assessment. And there, ACBSB asks schools to create a report using direct measures of student learning and comparative measures, right? In the case of ACBSB, that is internal and external to measure learning objectives. The external comparative measures may include performance on external assessments. So for those of you who are working with ACBSB, are probably very familiar with this standard, which takes the longest, of course, in terms of time, in terms of resources and efforts, also human resources as well. And there, ACBSB also states that, again, the goal of the assessment plan is to lead to continuous improvement in the academic programs. And then for those of you who might be working with IACB, IACB formulates that programs have to have a programmatic and institutional learning goals related to what they define as key learning outcomes. And then those key learning outcomes in the case of IACB comprise of critical thinking, teamwork, communication, and leadership. So here's my first poll question. And if you could answer this question, which is, do your academic programs have learning outcomes? And then do you have learning outcomes for your core management and business fundamental subjects? Perhaps you also focus on workplace soft skills, career readiness skills. Maybe you have a combination of both, or sometimes you might be working in the process, or you may not have had the learning outcomes formulated for your programs yet. So thank you for responding. And this is really wonderful to see that nearly all of you have a combination of both. Well, thank you for responding to that poll. And this is really good to learn. So you are on your way to having a successful assessment process. That's the first step, right? So we are talking about assessment of student learning as fundamental to the assurance of learning process. And it is, of course, part of the quality assurance and accreditation requirements, as I just mentioned. Then how do you meet this requirement? So many of you are probably familiar with this concept, I'm sure. And this is the Deming cycle of quality improvement. And it's used across the globe in many different industries. And we have adapted it to higher education, right? And it gets quite nicely adapted to continuous improvement for student learning. So the first thing, of course, in this cycle is to identify the learning outcomes for the soft skills, for the hard skills or business core skills. As you have identified, you have those in your program, which is wonderful. And then we want to make sure that we have well-written learning outcomes that include objectives. And that's quite essential, right? And it's wonderful. It's a first step to have your learning outcomes formulated, but also they need to come with the measurable, with effective objectives in order to get some useful and usable data. So in terms of objectives, for example, what is the percentage of students that we want to meet within each of these learning outcomes, the targets? We do want something that's quantifiable, of course, with our objectives in order to provide not only accreditors, but also your actual committees, right? Curriculum review committees or program improvement committees with information that shows you are in compliance in case of accreditors, but most importantly, you have continuous improvement processes in place at your institution. And then the next is then we'll move to what is the instrument we're using to measure our objectives, right? What is our assessment process and what is our overall plan? Oh, my plan got hidden. And then the next is after you plan, you really want to, after having identified the instrument, you actually conduct the assessment. Of course, you collect and analyze the data. That's the doing part of the Deming cycle. But then once you collect the data, analyze the data, it's quite important to understand why you see what you see, right? To study the data and then share the results with the appropriate stakeholders. And then once you share the results, once you discuss and understand your data, you want to look at, after having established trend, making sure you have a good sample, you want to look at what kind of changes do you need to make in order to improve upon the results, right? And then once you have acted on that intelligence, on that data and metrics, you want to kind of continue the cycle. So in terms of assessments, there are two types of assessments, formative and summative. And we all do formative pretty well, which is the course level assessments, right? That are integral part of our learning process. The formative assessment results are used to evaluate and also improve learning, right? We can enhance students' intrinsic motivation, their desire to learn with the use of formative assessments. And at the end, all of this contributes to improvements in teaching. Now, program level assessments, the summative assessments occur at the end of the learning process. It is used for accountability of the academic programs to improve learning. And then most often it's done in a pre and post test format to demonstrate the value added. Now, the summative assessments provide measures for integrated knowledge and retained student knowledge. So program level direct measures are used to measure retained knowledge, right? And skills that students are expected to have acquired at the end of their program of study. So the program level learning outcomes are written to capture that expected results of students' retained knowledge. You can do the direct measure of learning by utilizing a comprehensive assessment tool that could be either embedded into a course, course embedded assessment, or as a standalone assessment. Direct measurement results are generally used to support continuous improvement processes at your institution. In terms of indirect measures, they provide a view of student learning, right? For example, attitudes, perceptions, feelings. They imply student learning by employing self-reported data and reports. So indirect measures help to substantiate instances of student learning. They could include student surveys, right? Exit surveys, interviews, course evaluations. And you can also use reports on retention or graduation and placement as a proxy. These measures are commonly used in conjunction with the direct measures of student learning. So, and especially in my early days of working with institutions that are fairly new to quality assurance and programmatic improvements, I used to get asked this question all the time: why final grades are not appropriate for program level assessment? And here's an example, right? The course is marketing, and the components of a marketing score broken down as exams, group presentation. There's a paper component, there's also class participation. We have two different students here, and both have a final grade of 81%, which is great, right? However, we can see from the grade breakout that the final grade incorporates a number of items outside of learning, such as participation, right? And there's a group presentation. If a final presentation was used, then presentation grades typically take into account aspects such as presentation style or delivery, right? Form, function, style, and so forth. And those are, again, not related to actual learning. So for measuring retained knowledge and learning outcomes, as you can see, the final grade does not help you to comply with the spirit of assessment or program level evaluation. So here's a table that shows you the course level and program level assessment, and they're doing very different things, right? So if you look and go down, for course level assessment, we are looking at an individual class. For program level, of course, we're looking at all the courses that are offered in a program. When you offer the course level assessment, 100% of your students are going to be evaluated. Whereas with the program level assessment, you may have anywhere from 20 to 25% students enrolled in the program at any program level assessment at a time. And for course level, this is an indirect measure is what's used. It could be assignments or, as I mentioned, the final grade in a course. But for program level assessment, you want to use direct measure of learning, right? How students have performed utilizing evaluation rubrics. And a course level assessment, of course, course instructor is the person who is conducting the assessment. Whereas for program level, it could be anyone other than the student. In terms of faculty, individual faculty are deciding what kind of content and what kind of performance standards to adhere in his or her course, right? Whereas for a program level, you have either curriculum committee, you have either entire faculty of the program determining content and performance standards for that particular program. And then the results are reviewed by the course instructor in the case of course assessment, of course. Whereas in a program level assessment, you have either the entire curriculum committee or faculty committee, or you have a group that's put together that consists of employers and other stakeholders that are reviewing and studying the results. And then in terms of continuous improvement or changes that are made as a result of this assessment, data is at a course level, a faculty who is teaching this course may make some changes to his or her course in order to improve individual students' performances. However, at a program level, you're looking at a wider scope of changes and looking at a number of different ways to improve not only the curriculum content, maybe delivery of the content or course composition, and so forth, in order to drive improvement in the entire student performance of that particular program. So now, if we look at, we're talking about the learning outcomes, right? We're talking about creating the learning outcomes. There's a very helpful tool, which I'm sure many of you are familiar, and that is the Bloom's Taxonomy. And then it provides us with a list of action verbs based on each level of understanding and learning, right? This assists us in creating learning objectives that are descriptive, level appropriate, but most importantly, provides us with the measurable and effective objectives. So it starts from lower level skills and competencies, and then moves up in complexity and hierarchy. So it is not quite appropriate to use the word understanding, right, in creating learning objectives because it is too vague. However, we can measure if students are able to summarize, to infer, to compare, or to interpret. So the left-hand side list might be okay for a general description for something that does not need to be measured. But it is the right-hand list that we want to actively employ in creating measurable and effective learning outcomes. So here's an example of intended student learning outcomes by degree level. So as we move up the degree level, we are moving up to the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So you see the list of 8 learning outcomes on the left-hand side, and the learning outcomes as formulated for a bachelor's degree program, for a master's degree program, and also for a doctoral program. So for example, if you look at number 4, right, which is the core business knowledge related learning outcome. So here for a bachelor's program, it reads as applying major concepts within the traditional areas of business, right? That's wonderful. But as you move up to a master's level, we want our learners to not be able to understand and apply it, but they need to demonstrate that knowledge of business concepts, right, in a more integrated manner. And as we move into the doctoral program, we are getting to that higher level of demonstrated advanced knowledge and competencies in covering major field of study and management, for example. Another example is, as you can see, number 1, which is critical thinking. Again, the verbs we're using here for bachelor's program is demonstrate, right? An ability to obtain and process information in order to make decisions and solve problems. As we move to a master's level program, we expect our students to be able to integrate theory and practice, right, in the process of complex problem solving. As we move up to the doctoral level, we're looking at an ability to integrate divergent and contradictory perspectives or ideas fully. So you get the idea. So I kind of thought this would be a nice illustration of different levels of learning outcomes by academic degree programs. So now, having successfully created your learning outcomes, you need to define the objectives for each of the learning outcomes, right? We have our learning outcomes, and so we want to be able to, again, formulate measurable and effective objectives. So here, we call it the MBA Learning Outcomes Plan, put together by one of my colleagues, and it's used quite effectively when we work with our partner institutions. And then here, for each learning outcome, we have defined the objectives. So again, if we go to the business core learning outcome for an MBA program in this case, and we said, it consists of demonstrating knowledge of business concepts in an integrated manner. The objective here could be 80% of graduates will receive a score of 70% or better on each of the 10 core business competencies on the end of program comprehensive assessment. This is kind of assuming this MBA program has 10 of those business scores offered in the program. If we go to a critical thinking learning outcome that we looked previously, for this MBA program, then the objective could be 80% of graduates will receive a score of 3.5 or better on a 360-degree evaluation of their critical thinking skills. So you see the idea of how objectives go hand in hand with the learning outcomes. So now we have created these learning outcomes and the corresponding objectives. So we need to come up with ways to measure it, right? These measurement tools need to be objective, comprehensive, and again, measurable, right? But the challenge for many of us and the schools is to identify efficient, economic, and effective processes to conduct these assessments. So coming back to our learning outcomes plan, we can add a column here that specifies what measurement tool is used to measure each of the learning outcomes and its corresponding objectives. So here's my second question, poll question I would like to ask you, and that is, could you please let me know if you are able to objectively measure your learning outcomes? Maybe you have a way to measure all of them. That's first answer. Or maybe there's a mixture, right? Some of them are measured, some of them are not. Could use some improvement, or maybe you're not as able to, measure learning outcomes without, that subjectivity, without some issues. And here's some responses. Thank you so much for responding. Oh, let me share the results with you. And I see that a third of you, yes, you are able to measure your learning outcomes objectively. Wonderful, great job. And that's where most of us fall, right? 2/3 of you are, some of it are, going well. Some of it you definitely could use some improvement. And so good news is there's no one falling behind. And so that's why you're here, right? To learn more in terms of best practices and to learn more about tools that could help you to get to that more of them. You are able to measure all learning outcomes. So thank you for responding to that poll question. And if you have any questions, I just want to make sure I'm not missing any chat questions. Let us know. And so here's another example of learning outcomes assessment plan, right? And this one is for a bachelor's level program that incorporates direct and indirect measures. So here from 1 through 5, you have program level intended student learning outcomes, nicely and clearly defined. There are 5 of them. And there's principal concepts is the first, theories and practices. The next will be, there's intercultural dimensions of management. And there's also a third one is legal and ethical principles in business and apply them to a decision making. Fourth one is so oral and written forms of communications that need to be acquired. And the 5 is an ability to apply theory and practice in business functional areas to the analysis of problems and challenges. So that's the bachelor's level student learning outcomes example. And then you have your list of assessment instruments used to measure your intended student learning outcomes, right? So this first under 5, this is your 2 direct measure tools. First one is end of program comprehensive exam, which is covering student learning outcomes 1, 2, and 3. And then the second direct measure is a required internship. And then this measures learning outcomes 4 and 5. And then this program also has an indirect measure of learning through a senior exit survey, which covers all 5 of the intended student learning outcomes. And then for each measure, you have your defined measurable performance objectives. All right. So as a token of our appreciation for coming to participate in today's webinar, we would be happy to provide you with free access to our Assurance of Learning workbook. We also have an online module that teaches you, it's an online course that is used in some of our assessment workshops that helps you with understanding and applying a lot of the concepts we have discussed here. So I'll be also happy to provide you access to this free access to this online module. So please do let me know, and I will send you access. All right. So now that we have discussed, learning outcomes, objectives, and ways to measure, and what is the point to this all, there are several solutions we can offer to help you make your assessment process and implementation more streamlined, more effective, efficient, and most importantly, bring economic in terms of finances and of course, time and resources. Soft skills is the first service that helps you to assess, student soft skills and career readiness skills using what we call a 360-degree evaluation, right? Soft skills are these personal qualities that are important to be successful in the workplace, but also in our lives, right? So these skills can be taught and developed with experiential learning, but have always been difficult to assess, right? So we will have a separate webinar workshop covering soft skills and value skills. If developing workplace readiness skills is something that you care and you need to explore some tools to assist you, make sure you attend our value skills webinar. And then the next one is our Global Business Education Assessment Exam service. This is a comprehensive programmatic assessment tool that provides you with in-depth reporting and data analysis to help you satisfy your assurance of learning requirements. So I'll say a few words about the GBE Assessment Tool, and then a few words about the value skills in the remaining time. And as I mentioned, we'll have a separate, the next webinar will be on the programmatic business comprehensive assessment tool. And then the webinar after that, we will cover how to use what we call this global business GBE assessment tool for a course level assessment, because we understand with the transition into digital instruction and then coming back, a lot of the times, even the formative assessment has fallen wayside, and we want some efficiency and some assistance in that regard. So we'll cover the one after the programmatic assessment will focus on course level assessment, and then we'll offer the soft skills development and assessment webinar. All right, so GBE, if you have attended any of our previous webinars, workshops, you may be familiar, but to refresh, if you have come across our assessment tool, the key feature is its flexibility, ability to customize, right? We, Peregrine, have a test bank of 12 management topics. So you can mix and match, right? Depending on what your particular program's needs are, what your curriculum covers. And we have it separately for undergraduate programs and for graduate programs. So test banks have different levels. You can integrate it into your academic program seamlessly. If you use learning management systems, it also fully integrates into it. And then once you sign up to use our assessment tool, you will get full access, full administrator access to our client admin site. So you will be able to access all your individual student results and data, and also an ability to run all the wonderful reports that we have for you 24/7. But if you need assistance from our client engagement team, we have a team of client services managers who are happy to provide you with free training and help you to run reports. If you want them to run, they're happy to do it, except they are in the US, so there's a time difference. If you have someone who can get the know and how to be able to run the reports, I think you'll be more free to use them whenever you want to. But again, we have live client engagement team support available. And as Tatadri mentioned in our opening remarks, it's good to understand where your students are, right? It's good to get a picture of where your students started, where your students ended, what student retained knowledge, and see what is the value added of your program into that student's knowledge base. But it's also good to compare your students' results against various benchmarks, right? For Indian schools, we have an Indian business program, management program average. You can also benchmark your student results externally against all Asian business program students, again, by undergraduate, graduate. You can also compare against all international or schools outside of the US average. And also you can compare it to the US MBA programs or undergraduate programs. So we have a multitude of what we call external aggregate pools for you to select and benchmark your student results against. So you can set some good targets based on what is the appropriate pool of comparison for your particular program. And then you can use this assessment tool in an online setting without a need for a proctor. Again, we're all about flexibility, right? So you can use up classroom time to conduct this comprehensive assessment. But if your classroom time is more valuable, you can assign it as a outside of the classroom time exam. Students can go to the libraries, students can go to the computer lab, or students can take the exam in their own home or dorm or place of choosing at a time of choosing. And without a need to employ a proctor, because we have a number of safety and security measures built into the assessment tool. And then with this single tool, you are able to get assessment data and results, which you can use for your academic improvements, decision-making. But at the same time, you are able to meet your accreditation requirements. So the GBE assessment exam is available in 7 different languages. And the core one is offered in British English. The questions and samples are not US centric, because a lot of the times, that is a concern. And because students are taking these exams in their native language, we're truly measuring students' core management and business knowledge, right? They're not taking this language proficiency exam. And that's why we're able to provide you with amazing external benchmarking data and information. So this is a list of languages that the Global Business Assessment Exam is offered. And then depending on the language, we have the aggregate polls for European, for Asian, East Asian, and Indian, and other different regions. I mentioned we have 12 business topics, and this is the list of the core management topics that most often offered by a bachelor's or master's program. Again, if you have a master's level management program that covers only, say, 7 out of these 12 core management topics, by all means, only include those topics in your assessment exam, right? There's no need to test students on something that they have not learned. And then we also have customized topics, as you can see, number 13. And for the Indian schools, we have India-specific accounting, we have India-specific business finance, and India-specific legal environment of business. So if you offer a very unique program, as I'd like to share with you an example of the Fashion Institute of Technology out of New York, they have fashion merchandising as one of their customized topics, right? There's no one else, I think, who uses that particular topic, but it is essential to that program, right, in its success. So feel free to provide us with your test bank questions, and we are more than happy to upload it and offer it alongside of Peregrine's topics. So each topic is composed of anywhere from 4 to 8 subject areas, and typically we offer 10 questions to a student on an exam. So if you have a 10 topic exam, we're talking about 100 question assessment exam. And then each topic will have these any 4 to 8 subject areas. So the test bank has thousands and thousands of questions, and these are drawn randomly and offered randomly to the students. So this is an example of the business integration and strategic management. The nice thing, and the reason why I'm showing it to you, is we talked about learning outcomes, right? So these subject areas, these components of topic is what we could also use for as a basis of your learning outcomes. So essentially, these are your learning outcomes without the Bloom's taxonomy verbs. As you might know, we are known for our expansive reporting capabilities, and assessment without getting the results and data and understanding the data and results is moot sort of activity, right? So one of the reports, for example, the internal analysis report, is the one that most commonly used for learning outcomes analysis. And this is where you get the results that are broken out not only by topic, but also by subject. So you are getting a very detailed information and look into your program. So you will be able to identify the areas of strengths, areas of weakness or improvement. So you will be getting a lot of workable data and information to help you with your continuous improvement processes. And then the external comparison report, you can have up to 5 different aggregate pools and 1 report. And then you can run this report multiple times to decide what is your appropriate comparative pool. So here's some internal analysis. Okay, so I want to spend, there's a trend analysis, longitudinal report. And then each student receives a completion certificate. And this is something that students really enjoy receiving. And this is something that students can use as part of their job application portfolio, right? This is an external independent documentation of students having demonstrated achievement of certain competencies and abilities. So if you have a student who's applying for an accounting job, and then they have 95th percentile score on accounting and subtopics of accounting, then you can, when you're applying for a job, you can competently, as a student, show this as a proof of having achieved that particular competency and be able to conduct the work successfully. All right, so I want to spend a few minutes on the value skills and open the floor for your questions. So, we have talked about, of course, defining and measuring learning outcomes. And here's a tool, as I mentioned, for evaluating interpersonal competencies and how we can assist you with the mitigation of some of the challenges you face when it comes to assessing soft skills, right? So we know how important the soft skills are, right? Interpersonal skills, and how relevant they are in the success in the workplace. And we know how difficult it is to even define those soft skills, right? There's also lack of standardized measures, and there's a lot of subjectivity that plays into evaluating someone on their interpersonal skills. So we rely on individual self-awareness, and there's quite a bit of bias that goes into evaluating soft skills. So in light of these difficulties, we have created a new instrument to evaluate soft skill proficiency. So I hope, and I'm sure you are quite familiar with the 360-degree assessments that are used in industry. So with 360-degree evaluation, typically a variety of perspectives on a person's relative strengths and weaknesses are collected, right? So I could be the person who is participating in the 360-degree evaluation, or a student or a faculty, because you can use it for students, you can use it for your faculty development and improvement. So if a student is the participant, then the student could have peers or faculty or instructors or mentors. This works best for master's and postgraduate degree programs. If a student has had internship, then internship facilitator, interlocutor. If they've had previous work experience, you can have their supervisor who can evaluate the student on their interpersonal skills. So we actually have created a test bank of assessment items. So these are essentially soft skills, right, which are calling assessment items. And you can choose from this database. And then each skill features objective statements regarding performance so that evaluators have common ground in rating participants. So we have a skill, it comes with its own evaluation rubric. And that's how we're able to take subjectivity out of this assessment, right? So that way we're able to provide with objective and accurate measures of relative skill levels as observed in the evaluation participant. So here are some sample learning outcomes that you can find in our test bank. And I'm not going to read it, you can see them, sorry. So I'll be happy to share, of course, the presentation slides with you if you want to review them at a later time, or if you want to share it. We're also recording it, so we'll be sharing the link to the video recording with you. So as I mentioned, we have a database of 200 plus skills and corresponding rubrics from which you can select the skills that are relevant to your particular program. And you can have multiple instruments that are customized and that are flexible. And then you can also add your own skills and develop your own rubrics, but our test bank is really extensive, so I don't see why you would need to do that. And here's an example of different assessment items, skills that you can find in our database. And then you can create an instrument. Again, you can create multiple instruments. So the instrument creation you can think of as ordering a pizza. So ingredients are your assessment items, and you can have a pre-made pizza. We have a number of sample instruments that work for example, ACBSP programs, ACSB programs, IACB, and so forth. Or you can create a unique pizza, per se, for your different needs. As I mentioned, you can have different instruments for your faculty, for your departments, for your students, for maybe an internship cohort group. So that's the flexibility and customization piece to it. And then the rubrics is really where you are able to provide an objective evaluation of a particular skill. There's also, so here's an example of a critical thinking and problem solving. So it gives a sample behavior that corresponds to, for example, the highest level, right? 5, exceptional. And what does it look like? So, and then here's some information as to how you, so as an evaluator, you will receive a report on the instrument, report with the rubrics. And as an evaluator, you might have multiple students you're evaluating. And then you can revisit your previous evaluations to make sure that you are consistent, right? So until you lock everything, you are able to, revisit and make sure you're consistent, you're objective, and you're utilizing them or more familiar with the evaluation rubrics. So, this is a very easy to use platform as in our assessment, business assessment case. And through the client admin, you will be able to track the student progress, and you will be able to run the reports and create multiple assessments for different programs, and most importantly, track cohort performances over time. And as I mentioned, there is a participant, person who's getting evaluated. There's a person who is evaluating, we call them evaluator. And then each of them create their own profiles. And then I will have access as an evaluator to multiple students I might be evaluating. As a participant, I will have my assessment and see which evaluators have completed, which evaluators have not completed. And the system allows for automatic reminders and reminders to complete assessments and so forth. So it's a pretty cool tool. And as with all of our services, we have, of course, amazing reporting capabilities built into Evalu skills. There's a participant report, provides information about the participant's score, also average of scores against the evaluator average, also against the cohort group average. There's all built-in participants action plan report, which is really cool to work on the areas that need to improve. And then as a program administrator, you want to see at your student cohort as a group. And there's a group report available that shows the average for the self-evaluations, average for the evaluator scores for the group. And then also you can see from the group report who has performed significantly higher or who has performed significantly lower than the group. So you'll get the benefit of the entire cohort's performance information, but if you need to work individually with students who are underperforming, you have ability to identify and work with them. So this is what the participant report looks like. There's an average, there's the list of assessment items, and then how they scored against the average, which is great. And this is what the action plan looks like. And the nice thing about this action plan is it identifies, as I mentioned, where a participant could improve. And there's also a place where you can enter deadline or timeline for what you want to do to mitigate, and then for when you want to accomplish or when you want to complete those activities to mitigate, and then who is a person can help you to hold you accountable. So there are multiple ways to use Evalu skills. For undergraduate programs, you can use it as an end of the academic program assessment and help the students with information and data on the next steps. This is most actually helpful for graduate programs, as I mentioned, because graduate students have a little more experience with the soft skills and workplace readiness skills. In the case of postgraduate programs, you can use it as a pre and post program assessment to really directly measure your learning outcomes. And then you can use the action plan and then the results from the pre-program to drive the development of soft skills throughout the academic degree program. And then at the end of the program, use it as a summative assessment. And not only say if you have achieved your programs you have implemented for career development, have they been successful, but also if you have learning outcomes related to soft skills, like, we do critical thinking and, leadership or ability to work successfully in a team environment, you'll be able to assess those. As I mentioned, you can use it for staff and faculty development, see how well you are able to implement your mission, vision, and value of the organization. So in a conclusion, this is flexible, customizable assessment tool that helps you take the subjectivity out of the evaluation. And there's an easy to use admin site. You can get the individual student results, group reports, and you'll have an ability to also directly measure student learning related to soft skills. And at the same time, not only use the data for your continuous improvement work, but also for meeting your accreditor's requirements. All right, so the next is my final poll question. And I want to find out, how can we help you in your assurance of learning journey, right? Would you like to receive guest access to the online assurance of learning module? That's the course. You want to receive a free copy of the AOL workbook. It's a digital workbook, so we can easily provide you with the link. If you want to schedule a call or a meeting with myself or the faculty, please do let us know. And if you just want to receive more information about solutions as they relate to assurance of learning, assessment, and improvement of your processes, please do let us know. And thank you for responding to this poll question. And I do have 100% response. Thank you. So thank you so much. And what are your questions that we can answer?